Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for coming to Global Views this morning. My name is Marina Case. I own the Red Shutters in Warwick, New York, and I'm an interior designer, very passionate about the Williamsburg brand. I strongly believe in the revival of history and design. I'm getting a little feedback. Thank you. And I'm delighted that you could all be here for this amazing panel this morning. Williamsburg licenses the design archive of the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation to a roster of distinguished manufacturers. You may notice them as you go through market. And the brand has offered the trend meets tradition style for more than 80 years. So their brand has been present for 80 years. And in the rooms next door, you'll see to my right, your left perhaps, there are many Williamsburg products, and I hope that you'll take the time to stop and see those afterward. I would like to introduce some of our gracious hosts for this panel, Global Views CFO and co-owner Lois Del Negro and CEO David Gephardt, and also owner and founder. In January at Dallas Market, Mr. Gephardt received the Arts Academy Award of Achievement Honor for his leadership style and amazing contributions to the design industry through his career. And also, Lois Del Negro received the With It Women's Leadership Design Network Award, and they honored her for recognizing women who are here who have demonstrated over 40 years of successful leadership in the industry and helping them. Please join me in congratulating them on these prestigious honors. So I'd like to introduce you now to the panelists. Anthony Burrata, the king of East Coast chic, is known for his bold use of color and scale that honors tradition while defying predictability. His design work has graced over 15 magazine covers worldwide, and he recently celebrated the launch of his Nantucket collection with Weekend Max Mara. Check it out on Instagram, it's so cool. And being announced this week, we have a very special announcement through Architectural Digest. Anthony is Williamsburg's brand first ever designer in residence, living and transforming a home on Colonial Williamsburg's historic Duke of Gloucester Street. What's it like? No.
It's very cool.
How bad? Young Ha is principal and founder of Young Ha Interiors, a full-service New York design firm specializing in residential and commercial interiors. Fluent in a wide range of styles from historic to contemporary, her interiors reflect her love of art and artisans, materials, and textures. Since its founding in 2007, her firm has been published in Decor, Domino, and House Beautiful, among many others. This spring, Young is participating in the 47th annual Kips Bay Decorator Show House in New York City, her second time working with the organization.
Yay.
And that's coming up the whole month of May, in case you're in New York, and it's always fabulous to see. I encourage you to see it. Ron Woodson and Jamie Rummerfield. Ron Woodson and Jamie Rummerfield, principals and co-owners of the award-winning Los Angeles interior design firm Woodson and Rummerfield House of Design, have been featured in over 70 design magazines and publications worldwide. Ron and Jamie are true California-style makers, decorating high-style interiors that tell a memorable story by pairing noteworthy furniture, art, and textiles, mixing the old with the new. Both are well-versed advocates in preserving architectural history with a combined professional experience of over 30 years. Together, they founded SIA Projects, Save Iconic Architecture, to put a spotlight on iconic architecture's art and emphasis the significance of mindful preservation, particularly in their Southern California home. Gary Inman. Gary Inman is the Vice President of Hospitality with Baskerville in Richmond, Virginia. Nationally recognized for his designs that embody innovation and the best of the past, Gary has successfully merged his lifelong appreciation of beauty with his scholarly understanding of architecture and antiquities. He is an award-winning designer, author, and professional speaker whose work has been published in Veranda, House Beautiful, Decor, Traditional Home, and many others. Okay, so we're excited to talk about this fabulous topic of preserving our past and charting our future in American design. I want to start by asking the group how American design has influenced your own projects through your career. Gary, would you like to start?
Sure. Sure, I'll start. Thank you. I've had the pleasure of doing a lot of residential, but also a lot of hotels and resorts, and I've worked on a number of National Trust properties. So really the foundation of understanding American design, particularly the way there's a mix of different styles. You know, in spite of recent dialogue, we're all immigrants. Unless you're a Native American, you're an immigrant to this country. And with those immigrants came wonderful craftsmanship and an appreciation for different national identities. And in America, one of the great things is you see all of those things blended. So this is really the first aesthetic melting pot. So in the projects that I've always done, I've looked to that, discovered what was appropriate to the architecture, and that's really been the foundation. So I think it's entirely American.
Right, right. Young, what about you?
Yeah, I am the daughter of immigrants. And so American design for me is about that melting pot, about mixing all of these different periods and styles. And America really became a cool symbol of design and fashion and really led the contemporary world in these areas because of that ability to mix, to take from all these different cultures. And, you know, if you look at European design, they were always also emulating someone, whether it's Persian design, French, were obsessed with Indian prints. And in America, we were able to really take all of these elements and make it American. So I think that's what's really special about American design.
Mm-hmm. Ron?
For me, growing up and being a native Angelino, and Los Angeles has a very short history, but I'm from Hollywood. So given the movies, given set design, that's all a part of early America for a lot of us. And that is what drives our design, and that history of Hollywood sets and the grandeur of what was. And we try to keep that going forward.
Did you want to add to that, Jamie?
Yeah. And being in Southern California, the influences are a global influence when you have all the revivals from the French Italianite estates of Beverly Hills. And, you know, L.C.D. Wolfe, the founder of our careers, of our institution of design, when it comes to interior design, she resided in California. And she was a mentor to Tony Duquette, who is a big inspiration for us. Is the more is more, the maximal type mentality when it comes to American design. That is, that the theatrics of that is a big part of our DNA, and we champion that, carry forward, representing that into the 21st century.
And it's almost like glamour started in the U.S.
Yeah.
You know, that over-exuberant glamour.
Mm-hmm. Tony, you want to speak to that?
Sometimes I get like super emotional about this, but I grew up in Nutley, New Jersey, home of Martha Stewart. And so it was a very suburban, but simple kind of lovely lifestyle. The houses were all from these Victorian houses, which I adore. And I just rode my bike around all the time. But at 9 years old, my parents took me to Colonial Williamsburg, if you can imagine. Years later, I realized when I'm in the governor's palace that this is where it started. So I have such fond memories of Colonial Williamsburg and what it did for me as an American designer, because at that time, you know, I'm this kid from Nutley, New Jersey. Who knew? It was like the first palace that I go to. I mean, my first plane trip was the year before to Philadelphia with the Cub Scouts. So if it's like a 15-minute flight from New Jersey.
Newark to Philadelphia.
So, looking back all these years, I'm 59 now. I'm going to be 60 this year. And at 9 years, can you imagine 50 years of American design, all because of one place? So I am the spokesperson for the need for all of us as a community to come to Colonial Williamsburg and bring your kids to Colonial Williamsburg, because there's always that one person that's going to go in the governor's palace and want to be a designer. So that's how I'm here today.
Great. Let me ask the audience.
I'm in.
To Colonial Williamsburg, just show of hands. How many of you have been there?
Yay!
That's great. Next, I want to ask all of you, is there a particular period, I know you spoke about the Victorian homes, but is there a period that influences your design, in specifically American period, that you find inspiring?
Art Deco.
Ah.
The Jazz Age, for me, has always been this lovely blending of traditional, federal, neoclassical, modern. It's all coming together, and I love that it impacts fashion, automobiles, beauty products, buildings, interiors, everything. It was such a gorgeous time. If you think about it, a toaster was, toasters are in the museums, of course, because they were so beautiful. Vacuum cleaners from that period are in museums because they're so exquisite. I still go back to that period for that reason.
I would say 30s and 40s. That period of.
I wonder if we could close the door behind you.
Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry to interrupt you, Ron. Thank you.
No, I was saying that.
I think it would help with this door
30s.
shut.
See, I think I can do it. 30s and 40s are a period that of this sort of extreme glamour that people coming out of the 20s really revered, and it really showed in architecture. There we go. And I think it really set a precedent for what was to come, and it really revered time for me.
Jamie, what would you say?
I think I would blend Gary and Ron's comments. All the romantic eras, something about the opulence of living, 1920s, Art Deco was so chic and so fashion driven. And then 1930s and 40s, especially again in California,
Yeah.
it was the golden era of film and created this new horizon of opportunity and how one could live. And for us, that inspiration, just that spirit of inspiration continues into the type of work we do.
Anthony, what would you say?
I like to say that that I'm influenced by mid-century, but 17th century, mid-century. 18th century, mid-century, 20th century. So, and I'm pretty much like that, and the most fun when I first started out with my partner of 30 years, Bill Diamond, he took me to this Victorian house that he had decorated in Larchmont, New York. And it was this complete juxtaposition of mid-century Le Corbusier furniture and high-style Victorian furniture. I never got that because, it is in the mix. Now, I don't like doing that all the time, but there is something very special about being unafraid to mix all different American styles. So that's why I like all three.
Very cool. Young?
I would say the 60s. I think that's when you have Jackie O, CZ Guest. This is the first time when American style is sort of really emulated everywhere. The idea of sportswear. And in interiors, you have Albert Hadley, Sister Parrish, and that sort of iconic American combination of, homemade quilts and knotted rugs and then small prints. And then you had this kind of glamorous ease in the interiors. And for the first time, these, American entertaining and style is really unique and particular to the U.S.
Very cool. So I think a lot of our clients want the mix, like you spoke of, Tony, that you were able to mix it up. What are some of the mixers that you use? How do you get to that historic period meets, the fresh new, and keep it kind of relevant, present today? Young, you want to go? Yeah.
I think it's really, oh, hello. I think I lost my, okay. I think it's really important to mix things up because everywhere in the world, people have things that they've inherited from their grandmothers, their, aunt, and, you didn't throw things away to get a look. And I think it's important to have those odd pieces and create a kind of dynamism and harmony. And I guess that's sort of the skill of the designer. But having that kind of juxtaposition, as Tony said, those kinds of interplay of pieces is really important. Having something new, something glamorous, something old and beat up. I always say have something that's a little bit ugly in the room. That always seems to make it. I don't know why, but it does.
That one controversial item.
Yeah, right.
It's really about breaking the rules, mixing periods and different fashions of furniture and design. And you have to know the rules in order to break them. And it's not by happenstance that happens. It's a lot of studying, and we make it look really easy with clients, but it takes a lot of work to do that.
I just want to pick up on what Young said. One of the things about being an American designer or being a designer itself is that I think you have to know how to incorporate lots of different things, especially the client's things. And that does come with, experience. And there is something good about the personality of different pieces of furniture. So if it's new and contemporary and you may have to work with a piece of brown furniture and everybody's like, oh my God, brown's furniture now. It'll be back, believe me. So, that is the trick for me is that kind of respect of the mix.
When I was in design school, I was inspired by many memorable images, and they were always over the top, like very fashion forward. And when I came across Anthony Burrata and Bill Diamond's work, I was like, oh, these are my people. And I've just instant love for Tony, who I am so happy to be friends with and have him be my mentor. And so, but it's true, there is only a few talented people who can actually achieve that mix. And it is understanding the rules first. It's not arbitrary in any way, but it is throwing a little whimsy out into the mix of it and having a very well-edited plan. And so mixing the old and the new brings a soul to a space that I think is really important. And a lot of people miss that part. And spaces fall flat all the time.
I won't add much because those are all great comments. I just wanted to say I always start with storytelling, and I think the mix is magic. There's always magic in the mix. As a fashion designer, I learned all about the importance of counterbalance. So if I'm using a dramatic historic piece that's got a lot of gravitas, I feel like the fabrics have to be bold. I feel like that guides you. You can't be timid if you've got Lady Gaga in the room. You got to play to that. So that's one of the things I look for. I love Anthony's work, of course, but Mary Douglas Drysdale, Eric Kohler. You see these spaces, and you wouldn't want to change anything, and it's all the mid-centuries, and it's colorful, and it's bold, and there's a story always. And to me, that's a master designer.
Thank you, guys. That's very kind of you. I appreciate it. I think that there's such an emphasis on European designers and, like whatever is like big in Europe. I always feel like, you know what, it's right here at home. And I was trained to look at Sister Parish, who was the ultimate genius of putting American design together. And it's still timeless, and it's still something to be taught and to be learned. Just like Albert Hadley is so important. The American design world, it's not secondary to European design. It just isn't, and it never will be. So I'm like a real firm believer in teaching the next generation of what's great about American design.
Terrific. Color. Let's talk about color and color in American design. You brought that up a little bit, Gary. Who would like to say about how color works into their project?
I think Americans really had bold, bright color. And, if you look at Tony's work, he has those American primitive pieces that are these crazy colors. And then he has patterns going all over to mix with it. And I think that's very American. Painting things with really contrasting high octane paint in rooms. Some of these federal rooms have crazy color, and they're very imaginative, very playful. And I think the American spirit is about taking risk, really going for it, having those bold accents. And to Tony's point, I think actually the European designers are emulating us. They're going for the pops of color. I think we started that.
Just a little plug of Colonial Williamsburg. I started the project working on my house in Colonial Williamsburg with the deck of Benjamin Moore Williamsburg paint. And the project unfolded.
They were all on your seats in case.
I have to say, I have been using Farrow and Ball paint for my whole career. We would go to London all the time, and before Farrow and Ball paint became this big, giant deal, there was Colonial Williamsburg color. And so I just want you to know the colors are as beautiful, and there's more of them than Farrow and Ball. So I started my house with this complete, with this vision of working in Colonial Williamsburg palette, which, by the way, is so sophisticated that I spend days and days just taking pictures of the colors of Colonial Williamsburg. So, that's and it works for any kind of design. I have to tell you, it's the most beautiful paint, and I'm going to rant on about it, but I really think that it deserves, it really deserves another look. So that's my thing on color this week.
Fabulous. Thank you, Tony. Gary, I think, is next.
I just wanted to tag onto that because, as a historian who's taught design for many years, we were all so wrong. I remember when I first started practicing, Williamsburg colors were dusty pink and a sort of smoky gray. And then, thank God, historians did the research and archaeologists did the research, and we started discovering that early America was colorful and bold, and patterns were everywhere, and those gorgeous greens at Mount Vernon and Jefferson's Mars yellow. And so, I'm just so glad that we've come full circle now. We have the evidence, and we know that America was really setting that trend, and that we were always bold. I always say, go bold or stay in bed. So.
Yep, we say turn up the volume, basically, with color. And our work isn't beige or gray. We do a lot of spaces that make you swoon, that you can walk in and it takes your breath away because it's just so happy. Usually there's a happiness and a comfort that comes with whimsy, and color combinations, there's a science behind color, a serious science. It's not for the faint of heart. So, I mean, I don't know how many stories you've heard where someone picks a color and they hate it. They don't know why. It's so muddy. It's just not what they thought. And it's challenging. So I understand that beige is safe and that's an easy way to go. But mixing in color and color pairs, it's just such a lovely way to create your own personality and tell your own story, basically.
I'm echoing what Jamie said.
We're just one thing, and just an aside. A lot of people like really way too into trendy colors, like way not into that pinky rose color right now. I lived through the Golden Girls. I don't have to do it. I don't have to do it again. First of all, it grates on me for some reason, and you have to, being a designer, you have to know color no matter what, and and take a chance with lots of different colors. I really have seen color come and go, and there's no reason to do trendy color, because it's all out of style in 3 years. So as everybody knows. So anyway, that's my idea on pink.
Okay, so next I want to get into a little bit of design planning and your approach. How do you incorporate period elements into your design schemes to create, the fresh and the inviting, and that will also stand the test of time?
I think we start with really the property, what type of property it is. And we, again, being from Los Angeles, we have this exquisite architecture to work from. I mean, you can have a Richard Neutra next door to a Paul Williams, next door to a Wallace Neff, that are completely different. And I don't think there's many places in the country that you can do that. So it really depends on our client, the property, and if you look at our breadth of work over the years, there is one common thread that we do mix the old with the new, but it is always a fresh approach to the architecture to start with. And then we have really colorful clients also that allow us to do and be as bold as we want. So we're fortunate that way.
So you start with the bones. Did you want to say some more, Jamie?
I agree with Ron. Usually we share a brain a lot of times. We do every project together, and I can just look at him. I know he's thinking when his eyes are like, I'm like, yeah, I know exactly what you're saying. Or if a client says something off color or really bizarre, I can't look at him because we'll just start cracking up or like laughing, and just so Ron and I, when it comes to the context of color, like he said, usually there's cues already that have evolved in a project, whether there's an existing piece that the client loves or there's a piece of art, there's an art collection that they have. And it just, if you listen to space, it'll start to tell you what it needs. And we just conjure it up and help channel that for the client.
I just wanted to really quickly say, we've worked on a lot of historic properties over the years, and we've done a lot of historic properties. My firm's 122 years old, and so there's this huge repository of historic buildings that were created by our founders. When I go into one of those buildings, one of the first things I think about is craftsmanship. And I start looking at the spaces, and I'm thinking, I'm going to work with a blacksmith here. I'm going to have some Pietra dura there. And I start to think about the crafts that were a part of that time period, and how can I bring those back, and how can that become a moment within gorgeous marquetry floors and scenic wallpapers, all the things we all love. And that gets me excited, in part because those are beautiful things, but I'm excited about the relationships and the people I'm going to get to work with, and that's really for me a sort of foundation piece, particularly with historic.
I also would say that, don't be afraid to mix periods. One of my favorite looks is to have a really mid-century modern house with like huge glass windows, and then you have some really exquisite federal pieces, just hung like sculpture art, just very minimal. I think that juxtaposition is so interesting. Doing really deco pieces that are extravagant and crazy in a really modern, minimal room with no molding, just slight reveals everywhere. So I think, that's also very American to mix periods, to be a little irreverent, and to go with what captivates your client and also just your imagination.
I usually I'll be shameless on this one, but I'm working on the governor's mansion of New Jersey right now, and it's all old furniture, and it isn't all pretty furniture. So what we've done right now, instead of using the lamps that we were assigned to use, they sort of went in the closets and stuff, and we've used much more contemporary lighting, but all clean and simple pottery, like beautiful, simple forms, white in these very elaborate rooms, and it sort of like freshens it up, gets rid of the granny out of it, and I think I work with lots of young people, and they're always trying to like correct me when it's too old lady-ish. So you have to learn that at different times you have to spice up your work, or do things that you would normally have not have done, but now I'm doing them, so looks good.
Terrific, thank you. Have any of you used historically based paints? What about, I know Anthony talked a little bit about color and his excitement about the new Williamsburg palette. How have you incorporated those into your modern interiors?
I feel like I'm talking a lot. I love the traditional paints. When Farrow and Ball was older, not the recent release, it was really powdery and kind of a gross sludge that you would have to mix up. And those powders created such a magical effect on walls. And that's how people used to paint things. They would grind, lime or whatever it is, and mix it with emulsifiers. And, oil paints, which are now considered unhealthy and banned everywhere, those are really beautiful too. So those historic, where you can use it, where you have good ventilation, et cetera, those effects are really magical. And again, you could use that in a very modern way. In really classical architecture, obviously it works, but also in a really modern room. There's nothing more exciting than that play of light on amazing paint in a really modern room.
I love that. I've had an opportunity to work in a lot of buildings where we actually had paint analysis. I did a project for the Thomas Jefferson Foundation. There's a home on Monte Alto, which is the high mountain. Monticello is the low mountain, so we've got these captivating views of Charlottesville. And when I took that project on, I was excited, but I was also frightened out of my mind because I had a sea of curators looking over my shoulder, and decorative arts curators. So I started using the research they provided and trying to weave a design that was going to make sense. So some of the colors, I absolutely replicated the colors that have been there, and in other areas I had to shift that a little bit because there wasn't a way to get it to work and have a good flow. But that was really, to me, exciting because it was all about the way they created the paints back then. They didn't care about VOCs. We didn't know what VOCs were. And at the end of it, we really had a home that felt fresh and innovative. I did some of the tricks that Anthony just mentioned with the lighting's more modern and so forth. So when we did the unveiling, it was such a great moment for me. Charlotte Moss, who sits on that board, was there, and everyone was raving. Thomas Jane was there, and I was absolutely certain that I was going to be just unlicensed. I was never going to be able to practice design again, but it actually became a great project. And it was really because we leaned on history, but we were also willing to change it up, get rid of the granny colors. I was not going to have a peach entry hall. I just could not do it. So anyway.
Well, again, in California, we have such stringent laws on any sort of glorious finish. You cannot do a lacquer finish. You can't do high sheen, oil-based paint. So it really starts, you would think it would limit you. But also in California, there's a lot of wonderful plaster work and color you can do with texture on the wall. And so that's a whole other wonderful journey of color, because the texture is just as important, especially on the wall. So understanding the sheens, the finish, a velvet finish versus an eggshell, it's the most minor of details, but it does make a difference in this story of the space.
And again, the grandeur of Hollywood, it just evokes a rich palette that we start from a lot of times. And we have a lot of celebrity clients, and even the young ones really want to harken back to old Hollywood. And so it starts from there with us a lot of times.
It's hard for me to imagine a world without lots of color in terms of what I do. So I really think that it comes with experience. And even if it's just, I tell young people this all the time, get those big pieces of color from the paint store and start taking them and putting projects together in your fantasy. That's what I do for a client. So it just takes time and energy. But I look at a lot of paintings for color inspiration. I'm like a total crazy person for Matisse. And all of the color combinations are very evident in that. So if you're if you're a little stuck, just look at great art. It tells you all the answers.
Great answer. Okay, let's look at a little bit of history and looking forward. Why is supporting the preservation of iconic architecture and historic sites important to you?
I think that that is extremely important. The past informs the future, and if most people don't take the time to educate themselves on the history of design and furniture, which already has all the answers, and how you're inspired by that is what takes it forward and into new ideas. But understanding the frameworks of the ordering systems of design, the elements of color. In Southern California, we have world-class architecture. The modern masters from Richard Neutra, Rudolf Schindler, all the case study houses, to even earlier golden era, which is George Washington Smith and Wallace Neff, to name a few. And they're being demolished at an alarming rate because they're not protected in any way. Southern California has no understanding of historic preservation, which is maddening that the people who are experts in this field were watching this kind of happen right in front of our eyes. So we started an organization called Save Iconic Architecture, and it's to bring awareness to this topic, because once these structures are gone, they're lost forever, and there's only a handful of each example left. And so for us, if your heritage is torn down or disappears, what type of culture do you have to hang your hat on? And so as American designers, we're at a crossroad where you can identify the heritage in different parts of our history and facets of our country, and it's really up to us to educate on what exactly that is, because you can define those eras now.
And the nonprofit that Jamie mentioned, SIA, really started from, we have a huge global clientele, and you'd get people from other countries who do not know our history, and they'd have the wherewithal to buy this amazing house, And the first thing they would say to us, oh, we love this lot, but we're going to tear the house down. And we were just mortified. And we would go to the LA Conservancy to try to help, and they could only do so much. And then we became really vocal with clients and just looked them dead in the eye and say, you can't tear this house down. And they'd look at us like we were crazy. And so we said, okay, we've got to do something. And we formed the foundation 2 years ago, and it's growing like leaps and bounds now, because we're finding that once that property is torn down, you tear that, Paul Williams down, and everybody is like in an uproar. Why didn't somebody do something? And so we're doing something. We call ourselves architectural crime fighters by night.
Right, and once it's
Designers
down,
by
it's
day.
down.
It's gone forever.
It's gone forever.
And 9 times out of 10, they never build anything better in its place.
Me?
Gary?
Gary, here.
Sorry. I just wanted to say, as an educator and a design historian, I really think that our culture is it's part of our heritage and our legacy. But what it really also does is it informs the next generation. And as someone who's taught in design school for a long time, I am morbidly concerned that there's such a lack of cultural literacy. And cultural literacy means that you appreciate the past, you understand the past, you want to preserve the past. We have so many gifted design youngsters joining our firm, but they can't really participate in any kind of presentation because they don't know the language. They don't know the language. So for me, it's a multifaceted thing. We need to preserve those buildings, and we fight. My firm fights all the time to preserve the buildings. Oftentimes they're our buildings, but we fight for everything in our city. The other thing that I think we have to do is we have to start educating that into the curriculum so that every designer, whether they're an architect or an interior designer, they come out of that program as an advocate. And places like the Bean and Stock Furniture Library here in High Point that represents 6 centuries of great designers, 5,000 rare volumes there. We had a wonderful panel on Thursday night, quite a large audience there, and it was very interesting to hear some of the young designers in the room admit, well, I don't like history. But once they started to see just how sexy history can be, those first voice, having a conversation with Thomas Chippendale or Corbusier or Frank Lloyd Wright and hearing it in their own voice. And I think we've got to make it sexy. We've got to get it out there in front of people. We've got to talk about it and advocate and be relentless. Because if we lose this, we're going to lose not just the buildings, we're going to lose what it represents to our culture, and that scares the hell out of me. So.
I don't know if everyone's been to Philadelphia, but the Philadelphia City Hall is a ginormous building. They wanted to tear it down, but the city was so poor they couldn't afford to tear it down, which is a very good thing. So it's still standing. And a lot of architectural historians would say and would argue that it's not great architecture. It's a hodgepodge of French mansard roofs with like neo-Renaissance, this and that, and it's a hodgepodge, but that's sort of what Americans did. They kind of took all sorts of things from everywhere and put it together. I think, there's this sense that we have to tear something down if it's not perfect. We can only have perfect architecture, perfect buildings in excellent condition stay up. But that's really now, we're an older country. We need to preserve our history, and some of it is ugly. Some of it is not in style. And, you're not going to, we shouldn't be getting rid of everything that's not of the moment, that's not trendy. So I think it's a mind shift that needs to happen overall.
Mind shift, I like that.
Today I was driving here from Greensboro, and I'm driving on the roads, and there's these little sort of ramshackle houses, but of great design and great interest. Why can't we preserve all of that? Why is it just going to seed? I mean, these were houses that were really well designed, charming, And I think to myself, if this was in Southampton, New York, it would be $1.5 million. So why isn't there not an effort to preserve that part of the past too? And being at Williamsburg, there's so many little structures that are so fabulous that people live in, or or whatever, just a wellhead or a gazebo. That's the kind of thing that gets lost, but it is part of our culture as Americans. And I feel as though, like, why doesn't Bill Gates give money to preserve, the architecture of our place? I don't know. I think I'm very sentimental towards the past, but as everybody says, once it's gone, it's really gone, and like there's stuff to preserve all over. I live in a town called Riverhead, New York. Their whole main street was decimated by a Tanger outlet. It's like, why did we let this happen? The most beautiful architecture, all empty, because of an outlet mall, So that's what happens in our world today. And I think it's up to us as designers to be concerned and to, like you guys, I mean, it's fabulous. So, I think that's the best thing as a community we can get involved in.
Thank you, Anthony. So one more question, and then we'll take your questions as well. So if you could be reborn as a piece of furniture, object, or architectural element, what would it be? And you can hold up your things now. And then let's talk a little bit about that and why. It's show and tell.
Oh, okay. So I picked out, this is a Goddard Townsend secretary from mid 17th century Newport, Rhode Island. And I love this cabinet maker's work, but I also like it because it's tall and I'm not.
Juxtaposition.
Anyway, that's why I picked it.
Jamie, why don't you go?
I picked this Italian Brunelli silk pillow because I could be under George Clooney every day. This is his house in Lake Como.
I changed my mind. I want that too.
We all want that.
I chose a Federal mirror because I think the eagle is so American. These are really prized. We should all make sure to preserve these.
Well, I told Marina I would be the Villa Rotunda, short and fat and bald, but people still liked me. But this is what I wanted to be, and that's what you gave me. So here I am, the Chrysler Building, tall and elegant and thin. I don't know how much Spanx it takes to look like that.
Which supports your Art Deco.
I chose a Vladimir Kagan sofa for its low, sleek sexiness, which I try to be as much as I can.
Well, thank you, everyone. So we're going to take your questions now. And just a reminder that afterward, that the rooms to the right, or that way, I'm going to say, because I'm not sure which is your left and right, that way, right? We have the 2 Williamsburg rooms, that directions, that I would love for you to take a look at. And we're gonna go over there and be walking around as well, eyeing everything up. So I'd like to see what questions you have. We'd love to take some questions. Yes.
So Gary, I was just listening to you say with the younger people, educating them. So in my own staff, I came to realize this year that the elements of style are not being taught in our colleges. And so I had to actually have a class for my own staff. So like, what can I do as an owner of a residential company to help educate and encourage the younger designers coming up? Like, this is really, really important.
It's a great question, and thank you for asking it. I've started serving on curriculum committees. I was just at High Point University a few days ago, and when I brought this subject up, Joni Vanderslice, Libby Langdon, I mean, everyone that was a designer on the panel said, absolutely, absolutely, we need to fix this. The problem is that in the design schools, they're only teaching them Revit, they're teaching them the technical skills so they can get a job, but you cannot leave out the literacy and the artistry because this is an art form. Yes, it's commerce, but it's art. So I think if we really start reaching out to the schools and saying, you know, we're getting your students, but there's a tremendous missing gap. Can you possibly teach them some history? Can you help them to develop a useful vocabulary so that they can be functional designers? I go and lecture a lot, so perhaps you could do that. I go out to universities and meet with the students and lecture. But I'm also hoping to change it at the curricular level. So any of you that have a chance to do that, it doesn't take much time, but we do have to fix this problem.
Fix it, yes.
Yeah.
Hi. As someone that is working on educating themselves on the history of furniture, I've kind of looked to resources that are out there in not taking a official course, but what things would you recommend? Like you just mentioned, the library here in High Point.
Email me and I'll give you a book list.
Okay.
Honestly, I will. I've done that for a lot of young designers. I mean, you know, education's very, very important to me. So I'll give you my card and I can help you find some of those resources. Don't trust what you read on Wikipedia. Yeah, that would be my advice.
I think that one of the big problems with the design industry today is the magazines, which had a role within our careers of educating us. And this haphazard, throw anything together, like everything's good as long as there's a celebrity name attached to it. And that's not designing, that's not educating. And when I was blessed to work within the glory days of the magazine business, but now I won't even look. I think it teaches you bad things, not good things. But I watch as my staff won't even open magazine. They look at Pinterest as if it's a source. You know, it's like, I'm sorry, but I get very negative about it because they're not learning anything. There's nobody teaching them. And I think that the magazines, that was their role. So I hope no editors are here, but
It's a great question. I taught at the New York School of Interior Design an adjunct course, and I would often say to my students, go and visit the historic places. Colonial Williamsburg. In Delaware, you have the DuPont home. There's so many great, Deerfield, there's so many great historic places in America to visit, and it's really important that you see and experience the spaces. Where have you all been as youngsters, and what are your favorite historic places? Is there any? I know you talked about Williamsburg being your favorite, Anthony.
Old Salem. I grew up in Winston. And when I was 3 years old, my mom took me to the Reynolds Tower, which was the study for the Empire State Building. And at 3 years of age, I touched those doors, and that was it. I knew what I was going to do, but they're still there, by the way. They're still there, and they're Kempton Hotel now. But, you know, going to the state capital of whatever state you're in, Raleigh had gorgeous architecture. Williamsburg, I went to so many times as a child, I felt like I knew it personally. And then the first trip to New York, and you go to the Met, and you see, you know, the decorative arts there, the American Wing in particular. So, you know, I love what you said, Maria, because traveling and making the time to go to those museums and historic houses teaches you so much. It refines your eye, and you begin to develop a vocabulary. And then you know how to do the mix. You know what works together.
And I think it's really important to visit those historic places because you can't see scale on Pinterest. And
Which is why we'll all be in business a long time, right?
yeah, you really need to see the scale of these pieces and how they interact. I'm from New York, so all the Hudson Valley houses, there's Kaikit, there's Oleana, there's great places. I would say some of them could even be ugly, maybe, but you know, you see what you look for the beauty, and inform your eye.
My grandfather he did work on the I Magnin building in Los Angeles and many of the theaters in downtown Los Angeles on Broadway, we do have a Broadway, and there's a lot of fabulous theaters that were condemned for many years. But seeing them and knowing them over the ages, there's this nostalgia that develops, a love for a place that you visit, and it shapes your eye. And in California, the same thing. There could be the sweetest little bungalow that is so charming, and you'll see one maybe in the valley or somewhere else, and it's a lot cheaper. But you're like, wow, this is so sweet. And you can really appreciate it because in our concentrated city, those are millions of dollars, and they do get torn down a lot. Big, cheap white boxes are being built in its place, and so you long for those nuances that shaped a city. And when you travel, you tend to appreciate them more.
Did you want to add anything, Ron? Your favorite?
Well, my history goes back to I was a really young child. My father was a jazz musician, and I had the rare opportunity to run around the homes of the likes of Doris Duke. He played in a quartet and she loved my father. And as a kid, I would go to rehearsals with him and run around her house. And so I didn't have that sort of normal childhood that a lot of other kids had. So it taught me this appreciation for really wonderful architecture early on. And so I've been in countless houses like that from a kid to being an adult, and then to be able to work on some of those houses has just been a dream.
Thank you for sharing that. That's incredible. Any more questions? Would anybody like to ask a question? Okay, so let's wrap up, and we'll enjoy seeing you in the next few rooms. And also, Williamsburg has prepared a little gift for you. They are these adorable cookies, by the way. And be sure to take one. You have a favor as you leave. And the Kaspari napkins, it looks like in the resist pattern, right? Yeah. So please take one and enjoy your day. Thank you so much for being here. And be sure to also take your Williamsburg color card with your Benjamin Moore paints. Thank you, everyone.